In today's video, we're taking a look at some off-season rumors focusing on the Montreal Canadiens, Ottawa Senators, and Vancouver Canucks. And the St. Louis Blues have had a slew of players test positive for COVID-19. We'll discuss all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of things to discuss today. So first up today, we have the news of the St. Louis Blues having to close their practice facility. They apparently have had 4 players and 1 coach, a staff member, test positive for COVID-19. Now, I had seen an additional report indicating that they could have been exposed as they were in a large group that congregated at a bar somewhere in Missouri. And so there could be others who could have been exposed to this as well. So as I mentioned, they have 4 players that tested positive as well as a coach. So I'm not really sure that obviously that was a great idea, but obviously I understand like right now in phase 2 of the NHL, these players are still living their lives normally, doing a lot of things that they normally would do. But as we get into phase 3 and 4, I know there's going to be a lot more, of a tighter bubble, stricter rules, etc. So I know there's a lot of people concerned, and I've seen a lot of comments saying, is the season actually going to be able to get underway? And it's not going to be an easy feat. Getting these players into their bubbles for the next phase and the final phase of play is certainly going to be tricky, especially with all these teams in the United States where there's been a major explosion of cases, having to get through their training camps at their normal facilities before going to the hub cities. So I guess we'll remain to be seen, but right now, hopefully these Blues players all recover and are just fine, and hopefully we don't have more of an outbreak within the team due to this potential exposure. Now, as I mentioned as well, we have the NHL and the NHLPA continue to hammer away at this return to play and contract extension for the CBA. We've been talking about this, which feels like kind of forever now. Every day we've had updates from insiders, most notably Elliot Friedman and Bob McKenzie, reporting that today could be the day. The NHL and the PA are hopeful that today we'll have an announcement. We saw the same news this morning, but yet as of the recording of this video, we still don't have an announcement. But as we went through all the terms and things that were being leaked yesterday, we have quite a bit of the information. There probably could be a few things being fine-tuned or possibly changed before it's all signed, sealed, and finalized. And we're hoping still to get a memorandum of understanding sometime before the end of the weekend, but I guess we're going to have to wait on this. Clearly, there's a lot of things to cover. Getting this deal done and getting the players back to play is going to be quite a feat considering everything that they're going through here. So we'll have to remain to see, but no new news right now except that they're still hammering away, and hopefully we'll have it here shortly. Now, as I mentioned as well, we have some off-season rumors I want to take a look at, and mostly involving 3 teams, all here in Canada. The first one I want to take a look at is the Vancouver Canucks. Now, we touched a lot on the Canucks yesterday, but there was another piece of information that we didn't get into that I want to leave for today here. Now, of course, there is a lot of speculation that they may sign former defenseman Nikita Triamkin, who's formerly of the Canucks, been playing in the KHL. There's been a lot of talk that he's expected to rejoin and re-sign the team. But obviously, as we talked about yesterday, the Vancouver Canucks are going to be one of the teams, many teams around the league, who have a lot of cap issues. Even before the NHL pause and before everything else that's happened here, the Canucks were already going to have enough issues and tough decisions to make during this offseason. Obviously, they have several players that need new contracts, including some really important players, their goaltender Jacob Markstrom, the newly acquired Tyler Toffoli, defenseman Chris Tanev. They have RFAs like Jake Virtanen, Troy Stecher. They have a lot of decisions that need to be made, and they're not going to be able to keep them all. I would think if Triamkin gets his contract, more than likely between Tanev and Stecher, one of them likely have to go. But the player agent for Triamkin has recently stated on Vancouver radio that right now things are somewhat quiet, but he does expect a contract to be completed somewhere relatively soon. And it was rumored before that he was looking for around, I think it was around $2 point something million is what he was expected to get. So considering that all the players that we just talked about need to be signed or replace one of the 2, they have overage bonuses from this year that's going to count against next year's cap. I think it's about $1.7 million between Pettersson and Hughes that achieved different bonuses on their ELCs that need to count. They're going to be in a really tough situation. And like I said, obviously adding Triamkin, it brings back a different dimension on their blue line. But I know it seemed to be quite important to retain Tanev, and there's been a lot of speculation about Troy Stetcher's future, so I would have to think that there's a pretty good chance if Triamkin comes back, Stetcher likely leaves. But at the same time, they could try to move out a guy like Jordy Ben, who's got one more year left on his contract too. And up front, they've got some bad contracts that need to try to get rid of, like we talked about Louis Eriksson yesterday, maybe Brandon Sutter. But Eriksson by far is the worst contract on the team. They've been trying to move it for a number of years. It was very early in the deal, and it was very apparent that it was not working out. And I'm not sure if they'll be fortunate enough that he'll up and retire, kind of like what Zach Bogosian was going through with Buffalo, so he could get a contract termination. I think that's probably wishful thinking on their part. And a trade is possible, but not going to be easy. So Vancouver's expected to sign Trae Aiken soon, but I can't help but wonder what other ramifications that's going to have for their salary cap, giving all the other players that they need to sign and look after here before next season. Now, as I mentioned as well, I want to talk about the Ottawa Senators. Now, this isn't coming from NHL insiders. I just seen some notes from NHL media covering the Sens, as well as some Sens fans on social media, talking about the possibility of them bringing back goaltender Robin Lehner. Now, I must say, when I saw the idea, it intrigued me, given the fact that Robin Lehner is going to likely be a pending unrestricted free agent. We've talked about the possibility that Vegas does keep him and end up trading Fleury instead, given the fact that he was basically a surprise trade where he ended up at the Golden Knights at the trade deadline. And obviously these playoffs, if they end up happening, are going to be dictating a lot of these players' futures and where they end up. And if he gets a chance to play more than Fleury and takes them deep in the playoffs, well, that could change their minds quite a bit on how they handle their future. But if Robin Lehner hits free agency like many expect, there are going to be a lot of teams that are certainly going to be having discussions with him. He's had a couple of really solid years. Obviously won the Masterton Trophy. He's been in contention for the Vezina Trophy. He's really gotten his career back on track the last couple of years. And would a return to Ottawa be something that would make sense for both him and the team? If you take a look at it, Craig Anderson likely isn't coming back. He likely retires. Craig Anderson was turning 29 years old when they originally acquired him. He ended up putting in a solid decade with them as their starting goaltender. Of course, the last couple of years haven't been quite as solid, but really overall, Anderson's run in Ottawa, I must say, was relatively good, especially considering where his career was at when he first landed there. And Robin Lehner is certainly in a more strong spot now than Anderson was at the given time, but he's certainly familiar with the organization. Most of the players he played with, of course, in his first run are not with the organization any longer, but he would certainly be familiar with the city, with some of the staff. Obviously, like I said, he's 29 years old. They're at a situation now where their rebuild after the 2020 draft should be pretty much over. I mean, I don't expect them to be playoff or cup contenders here right away. That's not how it usually works, but they will have enough players drafted and in their system that they can kind of stop focusing on the rebuild and start focusing on the next steps forward and really developing these young players to help this team get back and being more of a contender instead of a bottom dweller. So obviously they're going to be walking away from the 2020 NHL draft with a minimum of two really solid prospects, but who can possibly play right away or within a year. I mean, they have several other picks. They could end up really with many more. But as far as like the first round, you're looking at a combination of guys like either Stützle, Byfield, Drysdale, Rossi. They're going to end up with two of those players depending on who the teams ahead of them select, where they're picking third and fifth overall. Plus they have the Islanders picked, which likely lands in their first round later, around that 15 to 20, 25 range, depending on how their playoffs go. So, clearly the Ottawa Senators are a team that's on the rise. They're going to have a lot of really good forward prospects. They have a lot of really good defense prospects. Goaltending is a question mark right now. If Anderson retires, we saw Marcus Högberg last year take some really good steps. I think he can be an NHL goaltender. Not sure he can be a starter on a full-time basis, though, on his own just yet. Obviously, there's still Anders Nilsson's in the mix, I know, but he certainly had a lot of health issues with concussions. His future certainly could be questionable. He's only got a year left on his contract. That wouldn't be too difficult to move if they needed to as well. But bringing in a guy like Lehner could really solidify that position for a long time, and they can give guys like Högberg, who could be the backup easily. And then you still have guys like Joey Decord, Philip Gustafsson, who can continue to develop in the minors as well. They have Robin Lehner holding things down at the NHL level, because, I mean, really, that's the big thing that they're missing. They have a lot of their other prospects that are looking really good to take on big roles here in the next year or two, but that goaltending spot has been weak in the last year or two, and if they can get a guy like him under contract, that would be absolutely huge for their organization to really turning this rebuild around. So while I don't have any specific links that they're going to be in discussions, and there's interest on the other side, I just found the idea very intriguing, thought it was a good idea, and I wanted to position it here to you today to see what everybody else thought. So let me know down in the comments, do you think Ottawa would be wise to try to bring back Robin Lehner, give him the contract that he's going to be looking for? Because there's not going to be a lot of teams that have the space to be able to do that, and he certainly is looking for that longer term since he's been working off these short-term contracts. He's looking to get paid. He's looking looking for term, they're a team who can offer it. Do you think it's a good fit? Now, lastly here as well, I want to take a look at the Montreal Canadiens. Now, there's an article in The Athletic, a mailbag article from Arbon Basu, taking a look at some questions from fans where he was asked about Vince Dunn of the St. Louis Blues. Could Vince Dunn be a target for Montreal? There's been lots of talk, really, this entire time that the season's been on pause, even before, that Montreal needs to maybe look at acquiring a left-shot defenseman, ideally somebody who can play in the top four. We talked before about a trade for Shane Gostisbehere. We've looked at, should they target Mikhail Sergachev in Tampa as an offer sheet because they're going to have a tough time with the cap, and Vince Dunn is the same kind of scenario. Now, as much as I'm sure Tampa wants to keep Sergachev and would probably do everything they could to do that, I think St. Louis would do the same thing as well. However, it's going to be really tough. If you look at their cap situation here, which I'll give you some screenshots from capfriendly.com, they don't have a lot of room. And if they want to keep their captain Alex Pietrangelo and they sign him to a fairly substantial, probably cheaper, but still substantial deal than we might have thought he would have got before, but still, if he stays in the mix in St. Louis, and then you have other guys like Colton Parayko, and you got the Justin Falk contract, you got Marco Scandella, this Vince Dunn deal is probably going to take, if they offered him, say, $4 million on an offer sheet, that's just under the point where $4.2 million is the cutoff, or the only compensation they'd have to give up would be a second-round pick. That would be a no-brainer to me. I mean, why not give it a try if you're Montreal? So Dunn's 24 years old in the fall, a $4 million contract on a shorter term, 2-3 year deal, something to that effect, would make sense for a player of his caliber. And even though St. Louis will not want to lose him, that would put them in quite a pickle to try to match that offer. Now, they'd be pretty much forced to trade somebody else away. There's just no way they could find room here. As I mentioned before, St. Louis is going to have other decisions to make. They're probably going to have to part with a forward or two. We're looking at guys like Alex Steen, Tyler Bozak. I wouldn't be shocked to see Jake Allen moved along. Like, those are the kind of contracts that they're likely going to have to move. But obviously, Vince Dunn's a player who's important to them, but it's going to be tough to retain if a team like Montreal or anybody else comes in with an offer sheet in that range, and it's not going to cost them a lot. So it might be a cheaper way to do it than trading for a guy like Gostisbehere or the money that they'd have to offer to a guy like Sergachev. So especially if you're a Montreal fan, I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Do you think Vince Dunn would be a good option on the left side? They got Alex Romanov coming over as well. They add some good solid youth there on the back end to the Montreal's blue line that could really inject some guys who can move the puck, create some offense, and could be a big boost to their team moving forward. So let me know your thoughts. Would Vince Dunn be a great offer sheet target for Montreal this offseason? So that is all your news for today. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.